A greeting to those of you who are tuning in via YouTube. Thanks, welcome for being here, and also really delighted again to be able to be with those of you who are here in person. I know there's an urgency that attends generally to people who are here in person, or people have made a significant effort to come. So that adds a sense of gratitude for me and an awareness of a certain responsibility. Today, the theme that is given to me through my own rotation of topics that I developed over the years is one, when it comes up, I'm like, ooh, I love this theme. It has such personal resonance for me, and over the years I've addressed it many, many times. And it's hard for me to figure out where to start and what to prune. So the theme is new birth, and that's a term I learned in my theology studies, having gotten sober and identifying as an atheist, and then experiencing retrospectively, like, wow, how did I get sober? So going to seminary out of curiosity about faith and spirituality, and I ended up in a Methodist seminary, and in the history of the Methodist movement, one of the things that's really important is this teaching around new birth as a part of the journey of transformation that happens through people, as in that tradition, it's viewed that the God of the Christian message is affects a person's life. So, but we've all heard about this, even if we've not heard about his new birth, because what I heard about when I was in this atheist, sort of anti-Christian phase of my journey was the born-again Christian. And I was like really skeptical and cynical about that in a way that I found me regretting it, as all of a sudden, here's what happened, all of a sudden I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and they invited me to go to a journey of discovering a God of my understanding, or a higher power of my own conceiving. And as a result of various circumstances, I started attending a church, and here they are talking about this transformational experience, and I was like, ruh-roh. So it's like all of a sudden I had been sort of born again without ever using the traditional formula, but I was like, a sight had been restored to me, hearing, I was hearing in new and fresh ways, and certainly it was captivity to freedom. I was like, oh no, I've secretly become a person who has a born again story. And so it's why I love the topic, is I was so averse to it, and all of a sudden it sneaked up on me. And I don't know where you are on the topic, but it also is interesting to me in my years of study. I've been clean and sober a long time from alcohol and substances, but I've wrestled with addiction in various ways. That's very much on point here. And how I view these matters of theology and philosophy has changed as I've gone through study and personal challenge time and time again. And one of the things that did happen to me after I went to my first seminary and became ordained in the Methodist tradition is that I continued to study. So I think of myself as still a student. And at a certain point, when I first came to work here as a chaplain after 15 years of church work, I undertook studies in interfaith ministry. And so that helped me to open up books that I had never looked at before: Hindu, and Buddhist, and Taoist, and Confucian, and Native American, and Wiccan, and I had a mentor who was a Haitian voodoo priest, and I was sampling the wisdom traditions of the globe and human history. And what I found out was that this born-again thing is more than just a Christian dynamic. There's awakening of the indwelling of the Shekinah spirit in Hebrew tradition. There is regeneration in the Buddhist and Hindu sort of schools of thought. And in fact, our opening song today, our hymn or opening praise piece, was about change me. It's not surprising that transformational change would show up in different wisdom traditions. If it doesn't, like, we should be worried, right? You almost should not try to participate in a wisdom tradition that doesn't offer support through transformation towards its vision of the best that we can be. I really think these things are about that. And when I see, we hate those other people, it makes me so sad, because I think the underlying motivations of the ordinary person who is a follower of the tradition isn't about that. They're about using this tradition to be more effective in have a greater life experience. And I will land the plane here, I promise. So we find the theme present in a variety of different wisdom streams. And it also comes up if you look at addiction recovery. In fact, in the Alcoholics Anonymous literature, one of the things you have to realize, AA's literature is sort of frozen in time in 1939. But Bill Wilson, the writer, talks about the new man. I wish we could fix that language, but nobody lets us sort of change that. But he means that the transformation that happens in Alcoholics Anonymous is that a new person sort of shows up. It's not merely not drinking. There's a whole thing that comes along with it. And today happens to be in I'm currently ordained in the United Church of Christ, which is a weird denomination, by the way, and I like it because I'm weird. And yet it is hospitable to a variety of different sort of approaches to the practice of Christian life. But today in the UCC, one of the things is today is identified as Mental Health Sunday. And, mental health gives us another way of thinking about this new birth idea. And some of you, don't raise your hands, but some of you have been really close to mental health challenges. I mean, addiction is a mental health challenge, but somehow it's viewed as if it's its own separate carve-out. It really probably shouldn't be. Anyway, this is our hope, is that the person who suffers chronic and acute depression could have a a transformational freedom from it. And now people are hoping psychedelics will do that, and that sometimes it's happening. The person who has obsessive compulsive disorder or anxiety at a level where it's diagnosable, because all of us are anxious, by the way, but these are natural phenomenon of the human psyche and neurophysiology that sometimes push us so outside of the neurotypical box that we worry about a person's functioning. And so then some acute intervention is worthwhile to perhaps help. I don't like the idea of everybody having to be this sort of narrow frame, but a new birth is something that we hope for. If you've ever been around somebody who's acute mental health suffering, it's a thing. You just really want to help them find healing. And so the place I want to get to in this short period of time that I have every Sunday today is an insight that hit me this week. Because I always want to be able to return to these topics and have something fresh to say. And what I have to say, I captured in one little sentence. It's not a high academic sentence. It's once and done is not how this goes. Because I think that's one of the sad failures of the conception of new birth in religion, but also in addiction recovery, is let's send them for 28 days and check, yay. If you talk to insurance companies, if you talk to families, this is a really bad notion of how you think about what is happening here. What I hope is the outcome of this place is, yes, a dramatic transformation, but also the engendering of a willingness to undertake a journey which will involve serial transformational experience. You're just going to keep changing and changing and changing. And I think that could be, to some extent, discouraging, because there's a lot of us who just want to be fixed and move on. I think I thought of my recovery early on as okay, I'm not drinking, check, yay. But what I noticed quickly is that I suffer from, one of my perspectives is demonic. It's as if I have a demon in me, and that demon re-manifested in other ways as the 35 years of my not drinking have gone on. It keeps trying to pop up. It's like the whack-a-mole game at the beach. And without being too confessional, I'm just going to generalize it and say that we have clinicians here who specialize in multiple addiction treatment and in addiction interaction disorder. Those are terms that have come into the foreground of addiction clinical work. And the various areas in which the demon re-manifests include food, nicotine, by the way, that's one that many people don't even realize they should want to address. Sex, gambling, financial habits. There are so many of these. There's a Wikipedia page that I show on one of my lectures, and I think it has 40-some A fellowships, like Debtors Anonymous, I always used to joke and say there's none of the above at the bottom. You click it, it comes up Denial Anonymous. And if you think you don't got any of this, be careful, because this thing, even though it manifests as a sort of like demonic thing, but it's a miswiring of some natural wiring that we have. And the natural wiring that we have, the psychology that I think is most helpful is attachment wiring. We need to attach. And my favorite theory in the clinical sense of what addiction is a misattachment. It's a malattachment phenomenon. The neuroscientists tell me it's a limbic amygdala thing, and I'm like, yes, but that's an attachment place of the brain. And then I bring the demonic thing, and everybody looks like, what? But I'm like, these are just different ways of spinning the jewel. And there is something beautiful about it, as much as it's really a torment to be caught in its grip. It's so hard to be caught in addiction. And I yearn for the simplicity of the 28 days fixed, move on. One of my hopes was that I could get to a point, and I'm glad it's coming up to me, where there's a thing that I want to have come out here that's beautiful and hard. And it's the struggle continues. Just because you get freedom from one way in which it expresses itself does not mean that the fight is over. And I was gifted with a thought about how to see that as beautiful. In my early formation as an atheist, I think one of the things that happened was my yearning for spirituality redirected itself into mathematics and music. I became a math and music scholar, and I used that to support my claim in the non-belief in any mystical, supernatural thing. But in fact, I don't think that science and spirituality are as much in tension as some people naively propose. And one of the ways that math has gotten really, math has always been beautiful, but I know I'm weird. But one of the most beautiful recent innovations in mathematics is the mathematics of a man named Benoit Mandelbrot. And Mandelbrot in the 20th century started exploring what he would coin a phrase of fractals. And fractals are cool things. And I'm going to try and stay at the very surface, non-academic level of them, but if there are those of you who are interested in math and physics or whatever, I would encourage you to learn about Mandelbrot's. So the work that he did has had application in so many different disciplines that lends belief to the importance of what it was that he was seeing. And what is a fractal? Well, a fractal is a phenomenon that exhibits roughness, non-smoothness, and what he called self-similarity. And so what that means is that a good example is sort of N.C. Escher pieces of artwork, not where you can't tell whether the stairway is going up and down, but instead Escher would draw these tiled floors where you could see a winged figure this way and a winged figure that way, and it's like an optical illusion. When you focused on one, you didn't suddenly, and then you realize they're identical figures, but they would recede into the distance, and as they go, and if you had zoomed into a smaller area, the smaller area that zoomed in looked just like the big area that you could see. So snowflakes are kind of like this. A snowflake looks like a snowflake. We have preschool kids do these snowflake images, but if you actually look at the crystalline structures of snow, and you zoom in and out, you see the crystalline structures repeating itself at these tiny, tiny, tiny levels down to the molecular, and then way up to the individual snowflake. And that's this kind of thing where you can collapse or expand, and the thing looks just the same. Another example that's, I think, fairly accessible would be a thing that looks like a segment of coastline. And you don't know whether it's 6 inches of coastline or if it's a big chunk of a map. But this is the fractal nature of a water boundary. And as you zoom in, it still looks craggly, right? Craggliness is fractalness. Craggliness is, not all fractals are craggly. Some of them are just really beautiful spirals. A spiral is a fractal. Every time you zoom in, the spiral is still there. You zoom in. Well, this is what I'm trying to say, is that the classic way the Alcoholics Anonymous community learned to talk about this without the mathematics, and I suddenly was like, oh, this is a fractally thing, is the peeling the layers of the onion. And there's always another frickin' layer of the onion. You'll hear people say that in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Well, now I can say there's always another, zoom in on the fractal. And people will be like, what? But it's almost as if what I want to say is that the fact that the struggle continues tells you about the depth and the nature of this thing. It's beautiful in a beguiling way. I thought of a lecture that I do. I have it on my phone, but I'm going to not step on and read to you. Joseph Campbell is a scholar who's looked at epic and quest journeys in the early part of the 20th century. Another one of my favorite sort of thinkers, and proposes a model of what it is for Indiana Jones and Harry Potter, and the Iliad and the Odyssey and Siddhartha Gautama and the followers of Jesus, and in all of human history we generate these stories that follow a certain kind of motif. But there's a spot where I can quote Joseph Campbell in saying that as you look at the heroic journey of an individual, within the transit from the beginning to the fulfillment, you have like tons of little ecstasies and disappointments. And that's what I'm saying, is that if you reduce this, just I gotta get off heroin and that's it, you have no idea that there's tons of ecstasies and disappointments along what yet will be ahead of you. And you might find out that, who knows what it is for you or what it will become, because you may be like, I don't have a pornography addiction, or I don't have that stuff. You just wait, because things will emerge that you did not see. And there's two things that happen. This is the annoying part of it, is sometimes you know it, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it was there, and sometimes it wasn't there, but it sneaks up and finds you. It occurs to me all of a sudden, I remember I used to say, I'm like not really an opioid user, because it was crystal meth, cocaine, alcohol, and weed were my only things. Like, no big deal, right? But I had this superiority crap in me because I didn't shoot heroin, right? But one of the things that happened in 35 years of abstinence and involvement in the 12-step world is I've had several major surgeries. And in the last couple of years, these major surgeries have involved exposure to opioids. And what I have discovered is that my demon will totally activate by the opioids that I never thought of myself as addicted to. It will be like, and I'm like, the doc gave me 30 of those pills and my wife is controlling my supply, but I know there's 24 of those things somewhere. And I'm, and finally she'll be like, no, you're not having any more, and I flushed them. I'm like, But there's a freedom when I know that they're not there. And this is the thing, is that this journey continues. And where this message needs to end up is, what new birth are you on the cusp of right now? So it's a message for all of us. It's not just a message for the wristband people, because their new birth issue is probably super clear, right? They can go ask their treatment team, what am I needing to change about? But aren't we all on the cusp of the potential for some refinement in our lives all the time? And if you are a family member saying, this person is so sick that I'll come, I have bad news for you. Generally, that's a distorted projection onto the person. This is totally off my usual outline, but I'm going to say it. My wife is a preschool teacher, and in that setting, this is so obvious, but I want to bring it to the adult setting first. But secondly, so when a 4-year-old class, she has a 4-year-old class, and little Johnny starts in September in the 4-year-old class, and she's like, Johnny's a little bit of a precocious kid and somewhat difficult or whatever, but we're starting to teach, and he hasn't learned this, or he's learning that, or whatever. They start working their way through the alphabet. And when they get to like week of M or Q or R, all of a sudden Johnny's manifesting as a different youngster. He's no longer participating in the same way. He starts pulling hair. He starts, like whatever. We don't go, Johnny is becoming a jerk, right? What we do is we go, let's call in the parents and ask them what's going on. It's so self-evident that Johnny is the identified patient of a system that he's like manifesting the discontent of the dysregulation that's in the thing that's bigger than him. And sure enough, when the parent conference is called, they're like, yeah, there's a divorce in play, or there's, a sick older brother, older sibling, there's there's a relocation, dad just lost his job, like whatever. There's some dynamic that is being mirrored in the dysregulation of this little fellow. Well, those are the wristband people here, in my mind. They are not only themselves perhaps dysregulated, but there's a thing that's going on around them in the prior history or in the present time that is manifesting within the system that they occupy to provoke this boil, this, blister, this abscess. And it's not that we're not responsible. I'm responsible for the harm that other people experience in my behavior. I am, totally. Even if my behavior is being driven by some more deep, profound, sort of systemic thing. But why I say this is that the responsibility attends at a larger level. The wisdom of the people who are willing to see that it's a systemic thing could ask themselves, how would I be able to change that would be less supportive of the sick enactment that I also see? Or just like, what I feel called to, who do I want to become? And what is in the way of me becoming and living my life in that way? And I never think it's one thing. There's not like one thing that's keeping you shy of the fulfillment of your image or vision. But then you want to reduce it to what's the next thing? What's the next thing I can do? And so this is where the one day at a time wisdom of Alcoholics Anonymous sort of trots itself in front of us. And it's like, oh, I don't have to fix myself in some grandiose way. It's not a like, I'm bad and becoming good, or I'm sick and I'm going to become well. It's just like better. I just have to figure out how to incrementally move. And each of those increments is a fractal transformation. It's a quantum state jump. And it's I think this helps and hurts. It's like, it's awesome because it can diminish the shame. And it's crappy because it puts us all in a state of responsibility. To be ever seeking to evolve. And that's the call, is to ask yourself that really profound question. What is the change that is knocking at your door? What would be a thing that you would be, in this moment, being presented to address? And the big tools of the big change of the addict or alcoholic to make this huge, profound shift can be really helpful to you. I learned this too, and then I'll shut up. In Alcoholics Anonymous, this is my preferred change model, is the 12 steps. There are other ones, Smart Recovery, Dharma Recovery. They're cool. But for me, this is how I think. What I learned is that the 7th step, which is humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings, has what I call a trapdoor to the first step. So if there's a shortcoming that I'm dealing with, I can go back and say, admit my powerlessness over it, and seek to apply the principles of the steps to these granular things in my life. And what I acquire by going to a place like this, or becoming a person in recovery, is I acquire a toolkit that can then help me with this ongoing sort of cascade of changes that just parade through what is the journey of a human life. I've become really intolerant of people who are like frozen in a state. I'm pretty convinced they're like as good as they need to be. I'm like, really? Because I find that an unappealing characteristic. So I am welcome to Denial Anonymous, by the way. So I've made my point. Let's celebrate change today. Let's seek to be open to the change that is coming upon us. And let's be aware that there are things to help us. And that change really does occur, which is awesome. We actually can change. We are not stuck in the past. And that's one of the great teachings of the recovery movement, is that people can and do get sober, and people can and do get free from these other entrapments, and people can and do improve in the quality of who they are in life. Thank you very much.